This is Doc Ock coming to you live and direct from Black Facts Headquarters Central today. How's everybody doing out there? How's everybody doing? All right. Sometimes we get just a little bit delayed. I don't know how that happens sometimes. Try to be working on these things day and night, and still, it seems like I'm always behind. But it's better to be late than never. That's a proverb for today. There we go. Dropped it in there on you already. Now, don't forget, give us a like and a thumbs up if you're looking at us on YouTube, and make sure to tell your friends and your family. I see everybody's been spreading the word out there. I keep getting a lot of requests, friend requests, and requests for memberships in the Center of Pan-African Culture. All of that is great. Please make sure when you put in a request on the Center of Pan-African Culture, answer the questions, especially the last question about following the rules. I want to make sure everybody read our rules so you understand what we're dealing with over here, okay, in terms of making posts and things of that nature. Meanwhile, we're going to be continuing on with our story on Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I don't know who this is, but I hope they like stories.
Oh, hey, I'm glad you picked up. I was just getting...
All right, there we go. Thank you. Meanwhile, autobiography of Malcolm X. So, where are we at right now? We just finished the first chapter, and we're moving into the second chapter. So, let's go ahead and get started because we've delayed long enough. And I will just go ahead and put on our slideshow here. Boom, shakalaka. Oh, I'm getting good at this one. I'm finally getting it in there. Just gotta try to work these slides. That's the hardest part. Finding the right slides for the day. All right. So on June 27th of the year 1937, Joe Louis knocked out James J. Braddock to become the heavyweight champion of the world. And all the Negroes in Lansing, like Negroes everywhere, went wildly happy with the greatest celebration of race pride our generation had ever known. Every Negro boy old enough to walk wanted to be the next Brown Bomber. My brother Filbert, who had already become a pretty good boxer in school, was no exception. I was trying to play basketball. I was gangling and tall, but I wasn't very good at it. Too awkward. In the fall of that year, Filbert entered the amateur bouts that were held in Lansing's Pruden Auditorium. He did well, surviving the increasingly tough eliminations. I would go down to the gym and watch him train. It was very exciting. Perhaps without realizing it, I became secretly envious. For one thing, I know I could not help seeing some of my younger brother Reginald's lifelong admiration for me getting siphoned off to Filbert. People praised Filbert as a natural boxer. I figured that since we belonged to the same family, maybe I would become one too. So I put myself in the ring. I think I was 13 when I signed up for my first bout, but my height and raw-boned frame let me get away with claiming that I was 16, the minimum age. And my weight of about 128 pounds got me classified as a bantamweight. They matched me with a white boy, a novice like myself, named Bill Peterson. I'll never forget him. When our turn in the next amateur bouts came up, all of my brothers and sisters were there watching, along with just about everyone else I knew in town. They were there not so much because of me, but because of Filbert, who had begun to build up a pretty good following, and they wanted to see how his brother would do. I walked down the aisle between the people, thronging the rows of seats, and climbed in the ring. Bill Peterson and I were introduced, and then the referee called us together and mumbled all of that stuff about fighting fair and breaking clean. Then the bell rang, and we came out of our corners. I knew I was scared, but I didn't know, as Bill Peterson told me later on, that he was scared of me too. He was so scared I was going to hurt him that he knocked me down 50 times if he knocked me down once. He did such a job on my reputation in the Negro neighborhood that I practically went into hiding. A Negro just can't be whipped by somebody white and return with his head up to the neighborhood. Especially in those days when sports and to a lesser extent show business were the only fields open to Negroes, and when the ring was the only place a Negro could whip a white man and not be lynched. When I did show my face again, the Negroes I knew rode me so badly, I knew I had to do something. But the worst of my humiliations was my younger brother Reginald's attitude. He simply never mentioned the fight. It was the way he looked at me and avoided looking at me. So I went back to the gym and I trained hard. I beat bags and skipped rope and grunted and sweated all over the place. And finally I signed up to fight Bill Peterson again. This time the bouts were held in his hometown of Alma, Michigan. The only thing better about the rematch was that hardly anyone I knew was there to see it. I was particularly grateful for Reginald's absence. The moment the bell rang, I saw a fist, then the canvas coming up, and 10 seconds later, the referee was saying 10 over me. It was probably the shortest fight in history. I lay there listening to the full count, but I couldn't move. To tell the truth, I'm not sure I wanted to move. That white boy was the beginning and the end of my fight career. A lot of times in these later years since I became a Muslim, I thought back to that fight and reflected that it was Allah's work to stop me. I might have wound up punchy. Not long after this, I came into a classroom with my hat on. I did it deliberately. The teacher, who was white, ordered me to keep the hat on and to walk around and around the room until he told me to stop. That way, he said, everyone can see you. Meanwhile, we'll go on with class for those who are here to learn something. I was still walking around when he got up from his desk and turned to the blackboard to write something on it. Everyone in the classroom was looking when at this moment I passed behind his desk, snatched up a thumbtack, and deposited it in his chair. When he turned to sit back down, I was far from the scene of the crime, circling around the rear of the room. Then he hit the tack, and I heard him holler and caught a glimpse of him spraddling up as I disappeared through the door. With my deportment record, I wasn't really shocked when the decision came that I had been expelled. Wow, expelled from school. I guess I must have had some vague idea that if I didn't have to go to school, I'd be allowed to stay on with the Gohanas, and wander around town or maybe get a job if I wanted one for pocket money. But I got rocked on my heels when a state man whom I hadn't seen before came and got me at the Gohanas and took me down to court. They told me I was going to a reform school. I was still 13 years old. But first, I was going to the detention home. It was in Mason, Michigan, about 12 miles from Lansing. The detention home was where all the bad boys and girls from Ingham County were held on their way to reform school, waiting for their hearings. The white state man was Mr. Maynard Allen. He was nicer to me than most of the state welfare people had been. He even had consoling words for the Gohanas and Mrs. Adcock and Big Boy. All of them were crying, but I wasn't. With the few clothes I owned stuffed into a box, we rode in his car to Mason. He talked as he drove along, saying that my school marks showed that if I would just straighten up, I could make something of myself. He said that reform school had the wrong reputation. He talked about what the word reform meant: to change and become better. He said the school was really a place where boys like me could have time to see their mistakes and start a new life and become somebody everyone would be proud of. And he told me that the lady in charge of the detention home, a Mrs. Swirlin, and her husband were very good people. They were good people. Mrs. Swirlin was bigger than her husband. I remember a big, buxom, robust, laughing woman, and Mr. Swirlin was thin with black hair and a black mustache and a red face, quiet and polite, even to me. They liked me right away, too. Mrs. Swirlin showed me to my room, my own room, the first in my life. It was in one of those huge dormitory-like buildings where kids in detention were kept in those days, and still are in most places. I discovered next with surprise that I was allowed to eat with the Swirlins. It was the first time I'd eaten with white people, at least with grown white folks, since the Seventh-day Adventist country meetings. It wasn't my own exclusive privilege, of course, except for the very troublesome boys and girls at the detention home who were caught, locked up, those who had run away and had been caught and brought back or something like that. All of us ate with the Swirlins, sitting at the head of the long tables. They had a white cook helper, I recall, Lucille Lathrop. It amazes me how these names come back from a time I haven't thought about for more than 20 years. Lucille treated me well, too. Her husband's name was Dwayne Lathrop. He worked somewhere else, but he stayed there at the detention home on the weekends with Lucille. I noticed again how white people smelled different from us and how their food tasted different, not seasoned like Negro cooking. I began to sweep and mop and dust around in the Swirlins' house, as I had done with Big Boy at the Gohannas. They all liked my attitude, and it was out of their liking for me that I soon became accepted by them as a mascot. I know now, as a mascot, I know now. They would talk about anything and everything with me standing right there, hearing them. The same way people would talk freely in front of a pet canary. They would even talk about me or about niggas as though I wasn't there, as if I wouldn't understand what the word meant. 100 times a day, they used the word nigga. I suppose that in their own minds, they meant no harm. In fact, they probably meant well. It was the same with the cook, Lucille, and her husband, Dwayne. I remember one day when Mr. Swirlin, as nice as he was, came in from Lansing, where he had been through the Negro section, and said to Mrs. Swirlin right in front of me, "I just can't see how those niggas can be so happy and be so goddamn poor." He talked about how they lived in shacks, but had those big, shining cars out front. And Mrs. Swirlin said, me standing right there, "Niggas are just that way." That scene always stayed with me. It was the same with the other white people, most of them local politicians, when they would come visiting the Swirlins. One of their favorite parlor topics was niggas. One of them was the judge who was in charge of me in Lansing. He was a close friend of the Swirlins. He would ask about me when he came, and they would call me in, and he would look me up and down, his expression approving, like he was examining a fine coat or a pedigreed pup. I knew they must have told him how I acted and how I worked. What I'm trying to say is that it just never dawned upon them that I could understand. Hello, I'm standing here. That I wasn't a pet, but a human being. They didn't give me credit for having the same sensitivity, intellect, and understanding that they would have been ready and willing to recognize in a white boy in my position. But it has historically been the case with white folks in their regard for black people that even though we might be with them, we weren't considered of them. Even though they appeared to open the door, it was really still closed. Thus, they never did really see me. Never did really see me. This is the sort of kindly condescension which I try to clarify today to these integration hungry Negroes about their liberal white friends, these so-called good white folks. Most of them anyway. I don't care how nice one is to you. The thing you must always remember is that almost never does he really see you as he sees himself, as he sees his own kind. He may stand with you through thin, but not thick. When the chips are down, you'll find that as fixed in him as his bone structure is, his sometimes subconscious conviction that he's better is his sometimes subconscious conviction that he's better than anybody black. Period. Dot. But I was no more vaguely aware of anything like that in my detention home years. I did my little chores around the house and everything was fine. And each weekend, they didn't mind my catching a ride over to Lansing for the afternoon or evening. If I wasn't old enough, I sure was big enough by then, and nobody ever questioned my hanging out, even at night, in the streets of the Negro section. I was growing up to be even bigger than Wilfred and Filbert, who had begun to meet girls at the school dances and other places, and introduced me to a few. But the ones who seemed to like me, I didn't go for, and vice versa. I couldn't dance a lick anyway. I couldn't see squandering my few dimes on girls, so mostly I pleasured myself these Saturday nights by gawking around the Negro bars and restaurants. The jukebox were wailing Erskine Hawkins to Tuxedo Junction, Slim and Slams, Flatfoot Flugie with the Floyd, things like that. Sometimes big bands from New York out touring the one-night stands in the sticks would play for big dances in Lansing. Everybody with legs would come out to see any performer who bore the magic name New York. You know that. Which is how I first heard Lucky Thompson and Milt Jackson, both of whom I later got to know well in Harlem. Many youngsters from the detention home, when their dates came up, went off to the reform school. But when mine came up 2 or 3 times, it was always ignored. I saw new youngsters arrive and leave. I was glad and grateful. I knew it was Mrs. Swerling's doing. I didn't want to leave. She finally told me one day that I was going to be entered in Mason Junior High School. It was the only school in town. No ward of the detention home had ever gone to school there, at least not while still a ward. So I entered their 7th grade. The only other Negroes there were some of the Lyons children, younger than I was in the lower grades. The Lyons and I, as it happened, were the town's only Negroes. They were, as Negroes, very much respected. Mr. Lyons was a smart, hard-working man, and Mrs. Lyons was a very good woman. She and my mother, I had heard my mother say, were 2 of the 4 West Indians in that whole section of Michigan. 2 of the 4. Wow, that's a lot. Some of the white kids at school I found were even friendlier than some of those in Lansing had been, though some, including the teachers, called me nigger. It was easy to see that they didn't mean any more harm by it than the Swirlins. As the nigger of my class, I was in fact extremely popular. I suppose partly because I was just that kind of nigger. I was a novelty nigger. I was in demand. I had top priority, but I also benefited from the special privilege of having the seal of approval from that VIW, otherwise known as a very important woman, about the town of Mason, Mrs. Swirlin. Nobody in Mason would have dreamed of getting on the wrong side of her. It became hard for me to get through a school day without someone after me to join this or head up that, the debating society, the junior high basketball team, or some other extracurricular activity. I never turned them down. And we'll end right there. And by the way, this chapter, I didn't tell you in the beginning, this chapter is called Mascot. And you probably already got the idea of why it's called that. Apparently Malcolm is expressing his feelings about these different stages of his life with the headings to his chapters. So, enough said. I see some people out there are paying attention today. I see Tony over there, and I saw Ronnie. Where'd Ronnie go? There goes Ronnie. And is anybody else out there? Nope, that's all I see right now. And I know there's some other people out there watching as well, and I'm glad for it. I'm glad you all are out there paying attention, and we are going to be starting tonight on tonight we're going to do, I'm debating on whether to start the Black Panther book, but I think I'm going to do another book. I don't have a sample of it right handy. Let me see if I got it over here. Let's see. I think I got it right. Oops. Wasn't supposed to do that. Oh, you know what? Let me do this. You can look at me. Me. All right. And I think I got it right over here. Let's see if I do or not. Yeah, this one here. There we go. And boom. Okay, so we're going to do this story right here. See if I can get it to come up. There we go. And bring it back. Okay, we're going to be doing this story right here. Martin Luther King and the Montgomery story. Again, we wanted to do something where we start off with John Lewis and the civil rights struggle, how he got involved with it. So we're going to continue along that path for the rest of the week, today and tomorrow night, with the Montgomery story. It might take us 2 nights. We might get it done in 1 night. I'm not sure. But whenever we get done with that, then we'll move on to the other book that I was showing you over here. Whoops. The Black Panther. The Black Panther graphic novel. Really fine book. I just love the artwork in it. And this book, ooh, look at that. There goes my bug right there. You see my bug? See the bug right there? That's my bug. We call her Sheba. So, really fine artwork, really great graphics. And it's a brand new book, so we're not going to read the whole thing because that would be copyright infringement. We're just going to read a portion of the book to give you an idea of what's in it, what the artwork looks like in it. Great book for a young person. Teenager, excellent book because it deals with the civil rights struggle, some things, history that came before that, and then it gives you a way to look at the Black Panthers holistically. It gives you a holistic, realistic picture of the Black Panthers as opposed to the stigmatized, stereotypical view of the Black Panthers that most people have, which is that they were a bunch of radical, wild-eyed black folks, men walking around with rifles and shotguns, etc., which was just one thing they did. They had at least 60 different programs that they were operating, and most of them had nothing to do with guns. They had everything to do with bread and butter issues, something you could sink your teeth into, literally. So that's where we're at. Tune in tonight at 9 o'clock. This is Doc Ock at noon and 9 signing off today. Don't forget to give us a like, a thumbs up, tell your friends and your family, and of course, feel free to make a donation. Become a supporting member of Black Facts. It's easy to do. Right below, you'll find a link. Just click the link. You can donate as little as $5 a month for 12 months, or you can do just a one-time donation, whatever floats your boat. But do give us some support. We need everybody's support, and we need it on a regular basis. That's why we're asking people to become supporting members or sustaining members by giving us a recurring donation as opposed to a one-time donation. All right. Have a good day. Peace out. We'll be back. We'll be black tonight at 9. Look for us then.